I drove 2 hours from Raleigh with a pot of chicken and rice on the passenger seat, still warm, wrapped in dish towels so it wouldn't slide. My daughter didn't know I was coming. She'd sounded flat on the phone that week, not upset, just absent, the way she gets when she's swallowing something, and I told myself I was being a worried mother, reading too much into the pauses. But I couldn't shake it. I used my spare key. That was the first thing I should have noticed. She'd never asked for it back. The entryway was wrong immediately. 3 pairs of men's shoes by the door, none of them my son-in-law's, a coat I didn't recognize hanging over the banister, women's, wide, dark burgundy. A stack of mail on the hall table that wasn't my daughter's. I could hear a television from the back room, too loud for that hour of a Thursday morning, and voices I didn't know. My daughter was in the kitchen. She stood at the stove with her back to me, stirring something she hadn't started yet. Her shoulders were pulled up near her ears the way they get when she's trying to take up less space. She was still in her school clothes, and it wasn't yet 9 in the morning. "Sweetheart," I said. She turned around, and something in her face did a complicated thing. Relief and embarrassment at once, like she'd been caught at something she hadn't done. Before she could speak, a voice came from behind me. "Who are you?" I turned. A woman stood in the kitchen doorway, heavyset, hair dyed too dark for her age, a mug in one hand and an expression like I'd tracked mud across her floor. I recognized her from a birthday photo my son-in-law had posted online 2 years ago. His mother, Bernadette. She was looking at me the way people look at strangers who've wandered into the wrong yard. "I'm Nina's mother," I said. She made a small sound, dismissive, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh, and turned toward the refrigerator. "The guest bathroom's out of hot water again," she said. "Not to me, to my daughter. I told Luca to call the plumber." Nina nodded. She turned back to the stove. She didn't look at me again for a moment, and when she did, her eyes were an apology she didn't know how to say out loud. I set the pot of chicken and rice on the counter. No one thanked me. No one acknowledged it at all. That afternoon, while Bernadette watched television in the living room and a man I later learned was my son-in-law's older brother took up the dining room table with a laptop and a can of beer, my daughter walked me through the house the way you walk someone through a place you're ashamed of, quickly without stopping too long anywhere, like if you moved fast enough, the details wouldn't have time to register. The guest bedroom was occupied. Bernadette's things were everywhere. A pill organizer on the nightstand, a robe on the hook behind the door, a pair of reading glasses on the windowsill. The room smelled like her perfume, something heavy and floral. "How long?" I asked quietly. Nina picked at a thread on her sleeve. "About 3 months." 3 months. "My brother-in-law was between places," she said, "and Bernadette's kitchen renovations started, and it was supposed to be through October. Then it was supposed to be through Thanksgiving. Now I'm not sure." I didn't say anything. I was looking at the closet, which was open and full of clothes that weren't my daughter's. We kept walking. The second bedroom, which Nina had used as an office, her desk, her bookshelves, the little armchair I'd reupholstered for her birthday 3 years ago, was a different kind of wrong. The desk was still there but pushed against the wall. The armchair was gone. Where it had been, 2 air mattresses lay deflated, stacked like pancakes. "Where's your chair?" I asked. She took a breath. "Garage." I nodded. We went downstairs. 14 months ago, I stood in this same townhouse on closing day, with a cashier's check from my retirement savings and a belief that this would fix something. Nina and Luca had been struggling, not fighting, not quite, but drifting in that quiet underwater way that's almost harder to watch than fighting. They needed space. They needed something that was theirs. I'd worked 35 years as a hospital nurse, and I didn't need the money sitting in an account gathering 0.5% of interest. "Mom, this is too much," Nina had said, standing in the empty living room with paint chips in her hand, the same way she'd stood in stores when she was 8, and I tried to buy her the thing she wanted most. "It's not a gift," I said. "It's a foundation." I meant that. The mortgage was in Nina's name and mine, equal owners on paper. But my daughter was the one who'd picked the paint colors and driven to the nursery for tomato plants and spent 3 weekends turning an empty space into something that felt like her. That was the point. That was everything I wanted for her. I wanted her rooted somewhere she'd chosen. What I hadn't accounted for was that Luca's family would find out. That night I slept in Nina's sewing room, a narrow room off the upstairs hallway with a fold-out cot she'd set up for me. She'd put clean sheets on it and a small lamp and said it was the only space, and I could see from her face that she was sorry in a way that went beyond the cot. I lay awake for a long time. I could hear Bernadette moving around downstairs. The hum of the television, a cabinet opening, the distinct sound of someone making themselves comfortable in a kitchen that didn't belong to them. At some point after midnight, I heard my daughter on the stairs. I listened to her footsteps pass the sewing room and go down the hall and stop in front of what I assumed was the master bedroom. A door opened and closed quietly. The next morning, I woke early and found her on the couch, a throw blanket that didn't quite cover her, her phone face down on the cushion beside her, the bedroom door closed. She was already awake when I came down. She'd gotten up and dressed and had coffee going, already moving in that efficient and joyless way of someone performing a normal morning. "Did you sleep out here?" I asked. "Luca has an early call," she said. "I didn't want to wake him." I didn't push. She didn't look at me. Bernadette came down at 7:45 and poured herself the last of the coffee without asking. My son-in-law's brother came down at 8 and opened the refrigerator and stood there for a long time. Nina went upstairs to brush her teeth, and when she came back down, she made a second pot of coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs that she set on the counter, and both Bernadette and her son served themselves without a word. My daughter didn't eat. She gathered her school bag and her keys, and she kissed me on the cheek, and she left for work. I sat at the kitchen table and watched them eat my daughter's food. She got home at 4:15. I'd spent the day quietly. I walked through the house when everyone was occupied, and I looked at things carefully the way I used to when I was a nurse and needed to understand a situation before I said a word about it. The garage was worse than I'd expected. Coolers stacked along one wall, the kind people haul to tailgates, and plastic storage bins with masking tape labels that weren't Nina's handwriting. Her armchair was in the corner, still in good shape, but pushed against a shelving unit that held bags of charcoal and a portable generator. Beside the armchair, under a tarp, I found a box. My daughter's handwriting on the side. "School stuff, keep." I lifted the tarp. Inside were the books. I recognized some of them immediately. Paperback chapter books and picture books with cracked spines, the kind that get read until they fall apart. A yellow folder with her lesson plans. And a small framed photo that used to sit on her desk at the elementary school where she taught second grade. The two of us, at the Oregon coast, the summer she turned 30, squinting into the sun. The frame had a crack across the corner. I covered the box back up and went inside. When Nina came home, I didn't say anything about the box. I helped her start dinner, and we worked side by side the way we always have, passing things back and forth without needing to talk. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, the way she moved around Bernadette when Bernadette came in to take a glass of water, the way she turned down the music she'd put on when my brother-in-law walked through, the way she set 5 places at the table and then stood at the stove until everyone else was seated. After dinner, she washed the dishes alone. Luca was in the living room. Bernadette was talking at him from the armchair. My brother-in-law had gone back upstairs. Nina stood at the sink and scrubbed, and I stood in the doorway and watched the back of her neck and thought about everything I wanted to say and didn't. The second morning, she dropped a glass. It was just a water glass, short and sturdy, the kind that doesn't usually shatter, but it hit the tile edge first and came apart into several pieces. She didn't make a sound. She crouched down and started picking them up with her bare hands. I was across the kitchen before I thought about it. "Don't, get something too." "I've got it." "Nina." "I've got it, Mom." She had a small cut on her thumb by the time I brought her the dustpan. She ran it under water, pressed a paper towel to it, and went back to making breakfast. Bernadette came through and stepped around the pile of glass shards on the floor without commenting, without bending down, without acknowledging that my daughter's hand was bleeding. I swept up the glass myself. That afternoon, I asked Nina if she and I could take a walk, just around the block, just for some air. She looked surprised, but she said yes, and she told Luca she'd be back in 20 minutes, and we went out into the November cold without our coats because neither of us wanted to go back inside for them. We walked half a block before she said anything. "I know what it looks like," she said. "Tell me what it actually is," I said. She pulled her sleeves down over her hands. Luca's brother had lost his apartment in September, she explained, and Bernadette's kitchen renovation finally started, and there was no one else. Luca's sisters both lived upstate, and it seemed unkind to say no when they asked. It was supposed to be 2 weeks. Then it was supposed to be through October. Now she wasn't sure anyone was thinking about leaving at all. "Have you and Luca talked about it?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I've tried. And he says I'm being unwelcoming. That family doesn't do that to each other." She paused. "He said I always make things harder than they need to be." I absorbed that. We turned the corner and walked back toward the house. The porch light was on. Through the front window, I could see the blue flicker of the television. "It's your house," I said. She didn't answer. I wasn't sure she believed it anymore. I called my attorney that evening from the front seat of my car in the driveway. I'd worked with her on the closing paperwork for this townhouse, and she knew the details. She picked up on the second ring. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always appreciated about her. "You're co-owner on the deed," she said when I finished. "Yes." "Then you have standing, both to set terms of occupancy and to remove unauthorized residents. People living in a property without a lease or documented permission from both owners of record, you can ask them to leave." I asked what that looked like practically. She told me. I wrote it down on the back of a gas station receipt. "Do you want me to send something formal?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want to try one thing first." I went inside and printed the property record from the county assessor's website. Nina's name, my name, the address of this townhouse, 2 owners, no one else. I folded it and left it in my purse for morning. I waited until everyone was at the breakfast table. I wanted them all present. I waited until Bernadette had settled into the chair at the head. She had started sitting at the head of my daughter's table, which had not escaped my notice, and until my son-in-law's brother had poured his orange juice and Luca had come downstairs with his coffee. I set the paper on the table. I smoothed the corners. I waited until a few people looked at it. "This house belongs to Nina and to me," I said. I kept my voice level. I learned a long time ago, after 35 years of night shifts in a hospital, that calm is more powerful than loud. No one else is on this document. No one else has legal rights here. Bernadette set down her coffee cup. "Excuse me?" "I've spoken with our attorney," I said. "Allied occupants, people living in a property without a lease or documented permission from both owners on record, can be asked to vacate. 30 days is more than fair. But I'd like you out before Thanksgiving." Luca stood up. "This is out of line. These are my family. They're guests who've stayed 3 months past what they said," I said, "in a house they don't own. You can't just." "I can," I said, "and I am." Bernadette looked at my daughter. Her expression was something I had no name for. Not quite anger, more like contempt that had been sitting in her for a long time waiting for an occasion to surface. "Is this what you wanted?" she said to Nina. "You put her up to this?" My daughter had been sitting at the far end of the table, very still, hands wrapped around her mug. She looked at her mother-in-law for a long moment. Then she set her mug down. "I didn't put her up to anything," Nina said. "But she's right." It wasn't loud. It wasn't a speech. 6 words, even and clear, and they landed like a door being shut. No one said anything after that. That night the house sounded like a storm warning. Drawers slammed upstairs. I heard Bernadette's voice raised, then Luca's, lower and angrier, then silence. I lay in the sewing room and didn't get up. I had spent decades getting up in the middle of the night when something needed doing, and I had learned the hard way that some things need to be left alone until morning. Nina slept in her own bed that night. I knew because I heard Luca go downstairs at some point and not come back up. My son-in-law's brother left first. He came down at 8 with 2 suitcases and didn't look at anyone. His car was gone before the coffee finished brewing. Bernadette took longer. She packed with a kind of pointed noise. Heels on hardwood, hangers scraped across the closet rod, the deliberate sound of inconvenience being performed for an audience. She came down the stairs as at noon with a rolling bag and a tote over each arm. She stopped in the entryway. "You've turned your daughter against her own family," she said. "I hope it was worth it." "She is my family," I said. "This is me turning toward her." She left without responding. The door closed hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood at the window and watched until her car turned the corner and disappeared. Luca packed a bag that afternoon. He said he needed time, that he had to think, that he couldn't be here right now. My daughter stood in the hallway and watched him do it, her arms crossed in the posture of someone bracing against cold. "I did try," she said before he reached the door. "I tried to tell you a lot of times." He looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his bag and left. The house went quiet in a way it probably hadn't been in months. Nina walked into the kitchen. She stood at the sink for a while, not doing anything in particular, just standing there. And then she dried her hands and turned around. "I think I want to bring my chair back up from the garage," she said. "Okay," I said, "let's do that." We started with Bernadette's room first. Stripped the bed, washed everything, opened both windows even though it was cold. Nina moved the furniture 2 inches to the left and said it felt better, and I believed her. She took the robe off the back of the door and folded it and set it outside by the mailbox in case anyone came back for it. No one did. The second bedroom took longer. We moved the desk back to where it had been. We brought the armchair up from the garage. It took both of us and some careful maneuvering at the stairs, and we set it back in the corner by the window where it belonged. Nina ran her hand along the arm of it when we got it into place. "I miss this chair," she said quietly. I went to get the box. I brought it up from the garage and set it on her desk, and she opened it without me explaining why. She went through it slowly, the books, the folder, the photo. She set the photo on the windowsill. She looked at the cracked corner of the frame for a moment and then left it there anyway. "Still works," she said. We spent the rest of that afternoon cleaning. Real cleaning, the kind that means something. Nina played music from a Bluetooth speaker she found in a drawer, old Fleetwood Mac records she used to listen to in high school. I mopped the kitchen floor. She scrubbed the bathrooms. We remade the beds and put fresh towels out and carried the deflated air mattresses to the curb. By the time we were done, the sun was low and the house looked like itself again. I drove back to Raleigh 3 days later with an empty passenger seat. Nina walked me to the car. "You don't have to go," she said. "You need to be in your house by yourself for a while," I said. "That's important." She considered this. She knew I was right. We stood in the driveway for a moment without talking, the way we do sometimes. There was frost on the neighbor's lawn. The maple in the front yard had dropped most of its leaves, and they were piled against the curb in that orange-brown way that means November is almost done. "I'm going to bring the books into my classroom," she said, "the ones in that box. My second graders would love them." "Good," I said. "And I'm going to reupholster the chair again, something brighter this time." She hugged me in the cold. I held on the way I used to when she was small and had a bad day and didn't have words for it yet. "I'm sorry it got this bad before I did something," she said into my shoulder. "You did do something," I said. "You said she was right. That's the part that matters." I drove home through 2 hours of bare winter trees and highway and thought about what I'd said, and I believed it. She had spoken. Quiet and late, but she had spoken. 6 weeks later, she called on a Sunday morning, which is when she usually calls, and she sounded like herself. Not performing fine. Actually fine, in the way you can tell after knowing someone their whole life. She'd filed the divorce paperwork. She said it plainly, as a fact, the way she tells me things she's already decided. She'd found a therapist. She was cooking real dinners again, not just pasta, because it was the only thing she had energy for. And she was reading in the chair every night, she said, 30 minutes before bed, like she used to. A few weeks after that, she sent me a photo. Just her phone propped against the kitchen windowsill, the picture from the Oregon coast sitting in its cracked frame in the morning light. Behind it, through the glass, the bare branches of whatever tree grows in her backyard. No message, just the photo. I kept it on my phone. Some things don't need to be unbroken to hold what they carry. They just need to stay standing long enough to catch the light.